Today's show is sponsored by City Theater. If you are a birthday person and you love making that whole week, maybe month, maybe season all about celebrating your big day, then the play Birthday Candles might be perfect for you. City Theater is presenting Birthday Candles by Noah Heidel and directed by Mark Masterson, and you can catch the show on the South Side from March 8th through the 30th. Join Ernestine as she takes us through a century of birthdays. The play is inquisitive, it's hilarious, it's heartwarming, and it asks big questions about our place in the universe and what we might do for the perfect gift. You can find out more and buy your tickets at citytheatercompany.org. CityCast Pittsburgh is supported by Fulton Commons. If you're looking for a gorgeous co-working space with lots of light and some truly wonderfully funky decor, check out Fulton Commons on the north side. The historic but very well renovated old school building is deep in the neighborhood by a park, tucked away but still super close to anywhere you want to be. They've got offices and common spaces. It's perfect for organizations or individuals, and they even have a shared food production kitchen on site. So there's lots of food-related events for their members. If this sounds like your dream co-working space, visit fultonpgh.org to request a tour. Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, how many police chiefs can Pittsburgh have in 2 short years? And what can we do to help our local federal workers find new jobs? I'm with CityCast Sophia Lo to talk about the week's biggest news, plus an unconventional use for Turner's iced tea. It's Friday, March 7th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Hey, Sophia.
Hey, Megan.
It is snowing as we record this.
I'm so upset about the snow.
It was 65 and sunny earlier this week. I met a dozen neighbors I didn't even know existed.
That's always really fun.
But at least we have fried fish and halushki to look forward to tonight. I feel like
true.
It's the most confusing weather time of the year right now.
I know. It's fall spring, but I need it to be real spring quick.
Truly. But if you were listening to this, you also have trivia to look forward to. We're going to keep it fishy, actually. It is hard to pin down, apparently, the exact beginning of when Pittsburgh started getting obsessed with fish fries during the Lenten season. But the Heinz History Center has at least one clue to guide them. Very old newspaper ads promoting fish fries and stuff. Sophia,
fun.
How far back do you think that they date?
I have no idea. Early 1900s?
Early 1900s. I'll give you choices. If you want to play along with us, you can also find this in our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter today. So
always.
1880s, 1890s, 1910s, 1920s.
Okay, so my early 1900s was wrong.
Well, if you wanted that exact decade, yes, that would in fact be incorrect. Actually, don't take our word for it at all. Even when we guess, we make it a point to not look at the answer key before we play this. So sometimes we are helpful, but sometimes it turns out we are in fact very, very wrong.
So if you do want to know the right answer, you will have to head over to our website. That is pittsburgh.citycast.fm. You can figure out that correct answer and test your knowledge with a few more trivia questions from this week's news.
Yeah, so let's move on. Sophia, I'm curious, actually, do you know any federal workers? Because I know at least a handful, and this past month has been wild for them.
I don't know anyone who's currently working in the federal government, but I did have a friend who finished up an internship with the national parks and then got that federal hiring preference and actively chose not to look for jobs with the federal government because he was scared, very rightfully so, that those jobs would end up getting cut.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of following along with them. Like, you get this mass email saying, like, do you want to keep your job? Let us know by the end of the week. There's the offer of severance, but it's not at all clear whether you would actually get that and when. Like, it was just sort of a nebulous promise for maybe in the future in the fall. And then they get more emails, everybody who didn't take that, severance offer, saying, like, what are 5 things you accomplished in the last week? Like, I can't imagine working anywhere that looks at me like, like the CEO sends you a note and be like, what did you do in the last week? Tell me 5 things. Like, it's such a weird request.
And, all these emails coming from Doge, led by Elon Musk, not an elected official, I would be furious if I were in that position.
And let's put this all in context, too. Reuters reported on Thursday that the United States lost 172,000 jobs last month.
No.
Now, that's total across the nation, all sectors. But Elon Musk's Doge department was responsible for over 63,000 of them.
Wow.
And a ton more are suspected to be part of like non-government workers who've, interfaced with all these government offices that have had cuts and funding freezes. Reuters says it's the worst jobs report that we've had since July 2020, and the worst single February on record since the Great Recession.
I don't like that information.
Well, I don't think you're going to like a lot of what we talk about here at the top of the show, but we are trying to keep
that's fair.
Extremely local here. Here in Allegheny County, the federal government is the 3rd largest employer. I was actually chatting with our buddy Chris Bream about this. He's a friend of the podcast. He's a regional economist over at the University of Pittsburgh. And he noted sort of the same thing that Reuters article did, that there are people who draw their paychecks directly from the feds, like the VA, for example, because of the huge hospital here, the U.S. Postal Service, the Army Corps of Engineers. But then there are thousands more people here locally whose livelihood depends on things like government contracts, for example. So he threw out a few examples. The Bettis National Lab, which among other things makes nuclear-powered naval ships here locally.
No clue we did that.
Yeah, new information. CMU has a software engineering institute, which is almost all federal contract work. But of course, their stuff wouldn't show up on a list of federal workers. There are people up in Butler County who do security clearances for OPM. So they're the ones that make sure that if you have access to sensitive information, that you have the appropriate security clearances, do all the background checks, all that.
Seems important.
And then we have the Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard. And I had forgotten this until Chris mentioned it. A lot of the military staff at the 911th, the 171st, they work over at the airport as technicians through the week, which means that for that period, they are civilian federal workers, but then they also work as military. So federal reservists when they drill. So they would be considered direct local Department of Defense employees. All of this is just so complex to wrap your head around.
Yeah, I had not considered that with the Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard. But obviously, another huge impact is the effect on our research economy. Earlier this week, a whole bunch of people, so lawmakers, union officials, university people, some more, they all got together to talk about NIH funding, aka the National Institutes of Health. So the Allegheny Conference estimates that Pittsburgh's share of NIH funding has a $2.5 billion economic impact here.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar, the conference, it's this big group of local business leaders from all over the 10-county region. They really keep a pulse on stuff like this to keep an eye on our bottom line.
And the Trump administration ordered a cap on part of NIH funding in February, but it's been temporarily blocked by a judge, so still kind of in limbo here. And Pittsburgh is an eds and meds economy now. And a professor quoted for Public Source said losing huge groups of people who get paid through NIH funding would be like closing a steel mill, back in the 1980s.
Yeah, I mean, I took that thought to Chris Bream. I actually sent him a Reddit thread that we had been talking about here, among our team on Slack, because people were deep in the comments. People were clamoring specifically for Bream's opinion on this.
He has the knowledge and people know it.
And the clout. I love that in Pittsburgh, people are clamoring for a regional economist's opinion on the news. It's
really
amazing.
Funny.
But anyway, he was just a teeny bit more dubious of the steel mill comparison. I think because on Reddit, people are talking about like mills shuttering and it effectively like wiping out whole communities, which was real. That happened. But with these federal jobs, of course, it's no less upsetting to an individual. It's just a different thing. So like federal gigs are often white collar work. You have to have a wide range of ages and experience levels to keep everything running. And if like 5,000 people, for example, lose their job, that's terrible. There's no making light of that. But some of them may have been like past retirement age anyway, and this lets them end their career with a nice severance package. These industries, for example, aren't all the exact same kind of work, so there's just more variability.
That's true.
Like the local job market doesn't get flooded in one area. And similarly, actually, like geographically, these folks live all over our region. They're not just in one neighborhood or one little municipality. So it's just a different thing than like the example in Reddit was when Butler Standard closed down in 1982 and it really affected Butler. And that's real. But most of those workers were young with decades of work in their future to try to figure out. They all had the similar experience, similar skill sets, and they all lived in the same small town. So like all of this just makes for really different sets of circumstances than what's happening now.
Okay. I'm glad to have that perspective. Still very scary to hear that people in all sorts of sectors are losing jobs.
Yes.
But I guess that is different than everyone in town losing their job in the same company.
Yeah. And Chris also pointed out just the scale of this is very different, too. Like in the 1980s, like Pittsburgh had waves on waves on waves of these closures. Like he wrote an email to me, like a 5,000 net job loss would be like a routine week in Pittsburgh in 1983.
I did not know that either. I am learning a lot this week. Thank you, Chris Bream.
Always.
But a bit of good news in this, our state and local governments are trying to soften the blow for these federal workers to keep them here. So if you've been laid off, there are opportunities at the state and local level because Governor Josh Shapiro and County Executive Sarah Innamorato are encouraging people who have been laid off, especially veterans, to apply for state and county jobs. At the state level, Shapiro says we have 5,600 vacancies, and the county reports hundreds more. So there are jobs that do need to be filled.
Yeah, I think it was a Trib story where the spokesperson for the county was talking about how they really want to help play matchmaker here to like help people with like interesting skill sets find a good spot with the county. And I'm sure the state feels the same way. I think there's also some open questions about local government buildings. So I don't know if you saw this in the list of things that happened this week, but
so many things.
There were a handful of spaces that the government said that they might close or sell. They were posted on a federal website, but then the list was taken down. So in our region, the spots on the chopping block included the Social Security Administration buildings in East Liberty and another one in Greensburg, plus the federal building downtown, which has just a ton of tenants.
That's the one I found was really weird, just because there's so many people in there.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that's in there, like Social Security, the IRS, the Army Corps, Veterans Administration benefits offices, military entrance processors, housing and urban development. Like, there's just a ton of stuff that happens in that building. Across all of Pennsylvania, there were 9 other properties on the list, and all of these are part of 320 buildings nationwide that were marked for, like, quote-unquote, disposal.
But again, those listings were taken away, so I'm
I don't
a little
know.
confused about what's
happen.
happened. Yeah. Zooming out a little, I thought something else in the trip that was really interesting this week. They were trying to get answers about our local VA. We keep hearing that cuts are coming to the VA.
Meaning the hospital.
Mm-hmm. And we do know that some VA staffers in the Pittsburgh area were fired, but like no clue how many, because I guess our local director isn't responding to requests for comment, like nothing about job cuts or funding freezes, all that stuff.
At least as of this recording.
That's true, at least as of this recording. But then they also interviewed this guy. His name's Max Steyer. He is the president and CEO of Partnership for Public Service. If you aren't familiar, it's this nonpartisan group that their goal is to help federal workers. Very important right now. Mm-hmm. And Steyer says by a head count alone, our federal government is actually the same size as it was in the 1960s. The Trib also cites data from the OPM.
Yeah, that's that Office of Personnel Management we mentioned earlier.
Right. And they say there were 2.3 million executive branch employees back in 1969. And then last year, there were about 2.2 million. So, like, very small difference.
And less than 1969.
That's true as well. So Steyer says we need to modernize our government, but the idea that it's grown too big in recent years just, like, is not true by the numbers.
Yeah, I saw all of that too. And I mean, I guess to President Trump's point about, maybe making federal government more efficient, I think it's also worth putting in context, like we've done that before too, like gone through these great big lists of government offices and contracts and processes and jobs to like try to trim any waste. I was reading about this. The last wave was led by Vice President Al Gore during the Clinton administration. And it was kind of the opposite of what's happening now. It was really surgical. It took a ton of time.
There was not an email jump scaring you on a Friday afternoon.
Right. And it sounds like officials actually like talk to each other before cutting a bunch of what turn out to be really necessary jobs.
Right.
But I guess for anyone listening to this and feeling like, geez, this is bleak, I will leave you with what Chris Bream told me, which is like, we still have no idea what, if any, of all of this is real, is not real, is going to last. Like the impact is really big potentially, and the uncertainty is certainly really bad for investment. But at least right now, it's a hard thing to study, and it's also a really hard thing to try to prepare for.
That makes sense. But you can apply to those county and state jobs if you're a federal worker.
Or if you know one.
Yes, send those links to your friends. Help them stay in Pittsburgh. We will have links to those job sites in our show notes.
Today's show is supported by the Frick Pittsburgh Museum and Gardens and their newest exhibition, Kara Walker, Harper's Pictorial History of the Civil War Annotated. The CityCast crew just checked it out. It's so vivid. There are 15 panels from artist Kara Walker. If you're not familiar with her work, in this series, she places black silhouettes on top of old Harper's Weekly engravings. It's easy to forget now, but back in the day, illustrations like these were the main way a lot of people interpreted what it meant to be at war. There is a lot of patriotism and not a lot of the many free and enslaved Black men and women who lived and fought and died during this war too. Also, the prints are paired with other Harper's Weekly illustrations, so you truly get a sense of how these stories were being told at the time. And because it's the Frick, a small bonus, they actually had the original bound copies of these Harper's Weekly illustrations. Like they were just in the house, handy, ready to go, and perfect for a show like Kara Walker's. The whole experience is just such a striking and visual reminder of what you often don't see in depictions of things like the Civil War. We highly recommend it. Get your tickets to Kara Walker, Harper's Pictorial History of the Civil War Annotated, now through May 25th. And learn more at thefrickpittsburgh.org. If you're ready for a great night out, the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra is shaking things up with a different way to do classical. Their Disrupt concerts are short, they are relaxed, they are often themed, and they have legitimately fun activities to do too. The PSO has 2 remaining Disrupt shows coming up this spring. First, there's Hope and Resistance featuring Prokofiev's 5th Symphony. That's March 8th. It is a masterpiece and a glimpse into history. Then Love Struck on April 10th featuring the greatest love story ever told, Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe. You'll get closer to the music as the PSO's onstage host guides you through every thrilling movement of these iconic works. Plus, did I mention that they are short? The performances are only 60 minutes long. But Disrupt is more than a concert, it's a vibe. It's an experience. Grab a craft cocktail and just enjoy the live music in a very chill, come-as-you-are atmosphere. No dress code, no rules, just a perfect evening in Pittsburgh. Shake up your night at pittsburghsymphony.org/disrupt. Tickets start at just $25. So let's take a quick spin through some city news now. More drama over the police chief role.
Again.
Acting Chief Christopher Ragland has decided pretty abruptly to leave the bureau and just bow out of this whole chief process altogether. He says he's going into the private sector and that just this whole thing has been a big, quote, political football. Oh my gosh, Chief Ragland. Woo.
The police chief role seems kind of cursed now. Reminder, Ragland became acting chief after the former chief, Larry Scarrato, decided to pursue a full-time career as a college basketball referee.
That sentence never is not funny. Like, it's always funny to me.
Yeah, we have covered that extensively here. We'll link back to past coverage if you missed this. So then Mayor Gainey nominated Ragland for the chief position in early February, but there was not quick movement by city council to confirm him in that position.
I mean, if you mean by not quick, you mean positively stonewalling. Correct. Council has been so vocal about how mad they are about Gainey's handshake deal with Scarrato. So then they passed legislation that would allow them, council, to interview people under oath for roles like the police chief.
Yeah, because during his interview, Scarrato said he would not keep refereeing, and council did not know about this handshake deal he had with Gainey, that he could go back to college refereeing part-time after a year on the job. So the idea is that, having Scarrato do this interview under oath would have kept him honest.
I mean, I kind of think that talking to council in an official capacity and saying, you won't do something is kind of an oath. Like, to me, like that's what that means. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe this makes it like legally binding in some way.
Maybe. I don't know if you can come back and have the receipts. Like, you said you wouldn't do this and there'd be some kind of consequence.
I mean, Councilman Coghill had the receipts. Like, he played the clip of Scarrato saying, I will not do this. And then he's like, but then he did. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe if anyone in future changes their tune like this, we won't be out over $1 million in pension payments to a chief that only worked a little over a year and change.
Yeah.
Anywho, interviews under oath would also apparently apply to other department heads, so not just the police chief.
Yeah, but moving back to Ragland, council also wanted him to take part in community meetings in each of the police zones. So that would have been 6 meetings total. And this was also something our local NAACP chapter advocated for. So this wasn't a council-only idea.
Yeah, and all of this to say, like, when Ragland took his name out of the running this week, he said it was because of that, that political football and some supposed deal making that people were trying to get him to engage in behind the scenes.
Are there any more details he shared? Because I'm going to be honest, I did not tune into his full speech.
I mean, he talked a little about how he was like standing by his principles and his morals and this decision. He did not talk about specific situations, didn't call anyone out, but he said he was walking away, so he did not have to cross a, quote, bright line.
Oh, that's kind of spicy. I wonder if he had a bad experience with somebody in city leadership.
I mean, he said the bright line at least didn't have anything to do with Gainey or the mayor's office. That the mayor asked him to lead with integrity and honesty, but he did not give clear-cut answers when asked about how he felt about council. And I mean, there's so many people that have a vested interest in the police chief. Like, it truly could be anybody. Gainey issued a press release after the resignation saying he thought that Ragland was the right person to be chief, but he respects Ragland's decision and will not be submitting a new nomination to council until the right person and the right process is picked. Because remember, council has said they will not, under any circumstances, be paying for another national search. It's very expensive. For council's part, there were a handful of, as you put it, Sophia, spicy comments. Coghill said good riddance, which felt strong to me. He said that Ragland leaving because of political football means he probably wasn't going to be a good fit anyway. Teresa Cale Smith told WESA that she heard some police officers didn't even like Ragland, which, like, okay, but I mean,
there's a lot of people. I wouldn't expect everyone to, be huge fans.
That was my first thought too. Like, there's hundreds of employees in the bureau. Like, do you expect all of them to like the prospective new boss? I mean, gosh. Bob Charland told the Trib that this is, quote, another example of the mayor's incompetence.
Okay, also coming in hot.
We'll have links in our show notes if you want to dig into some of this, maybe get into the nitty-gritty about what city leadership thinks.
Yeah. Megan, were you surprised by Ragland's decision to step down? I really was, especially because there was that weird press conference that happened. We talked about it last Friday. This press conference was about public safety downtown, but Gainey ended up stepping onto the mic and asking Ragland if he wanted the police chief job, among other things. And Ragland said yes at the time.
I mean, he does, but like, what other answer could he have possibly given in that moment?
That's true, but I figured, there must have been conversations before he was officially nominated, and he could have just not put his name in the running then.
I mean, yeah, but like then that press conference happens and all the other things that have like occurred, like these little like backbiting comments from council and like standing in the way of this. Like, I mean, I don't know anything about Ragland personally, truly don't. But like if I have worked my whole career for like a certain, like trying to get to a certain place, and then all of this little stuff happens and I don't have to be there, like I don't have to stick around if I don't want to. And I'm looking at a potential boss like Gainey that's sort of become a bit of a lightning rod on all of this. I don't know. I can't say I blame Ragland for bowing out. It's just such an uncomfortable position to be in. And that's before anyone tries to get him to make some kind of deal in some way. I mean, like if you're looking at his career prospects, like he could go to a suburban bureau and do great for himself. He could parlay his skills elsewhere and make bank. I mean, if I were him, I would probably not want the political headache of all of this. Because like if Gainey loses the primary, for example, it is not unheard of to get replaced anyway. When mayors change, so do bureaucrats, like people in charge of public safety.
And, speaking of who's in charge right now, Ragland leaving means that our new acting chief is Martin Devine, who was previously an assistant chief.
Yeah, and there's no like obvious internal choice waiting in the wings. So usually like a small group of command staffers might get groomed for this kind of thing so that, the city has options as folks, naturally depart. I don't think that's been able to happen in recent years among all this like change. For what it's worth, I cannot express how many people were sending me something this week about Jason Lando. So if that's a new name for you, he was a Pittsburgh cop for years. He worked in Vice. He was a Zone 5 commander. He was in the running for chief alongside Scarrato during the last national search, but we did not pick him. A lot of people really liked Lando and respected him. I'm sure not everybody, but I have got to imagine his phone has been blowing up this week. But I mean, who knows if this guy even still wants the gig. He has a nice position over in Frederick, Maryland, and he gets a lot of accolades down there. So I don't know. If I were him looking at Pittsburgh, I'd maybe be a little nervous about that too.
And, Megan, you kind of alluded to this, but all of this is happening as Mayor Gainey and Corey O'Connor, the county controller, are duking it out before the primary for the mayoral race. Earlier this week, Axios Pittsburgh reported that polling showed O'Connor ahead by 12 points. That was before all of this Ragland stuff happened, and I'm sure that is also swaying people.
Yeah, I mean, one caveat. Axios did not say who gave them that internal poll, only which company conducted it, which leads me to maybe think that it was the O'Connor people, because it was very complimentary of O'Connor. And like Gainey's people, if they had done that poll, I can't imagine they would have distributed this. But that's just my own like thinking in the background.
That's true. And another thing, we're also seeing a lot of reporting from outside of Pittsburgh, too. The Guardian covered this.
The Intercept. So many people are talking about this.
Yeah, they're talking about the donations for the Democratic mayoral primary. They've been pointing out that O'Connor's getting donations from Republicans, but so is Gainey, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Anyway, a reminder that the mayoral primary is Tuesday, May 20th. You must be a registered voter with the party you want to vote for. Because we have a closed system. So if you are not affiliated with the Democrats or Republicans already, you have to pick an affiliation by May 5th to vote in the primary.
CityCast Pittsburgh is brought to you today by Kesem. An estimated 5 million children are coping right now with a parent's cancer diagnosis. Being a kid is hard enough without extra anxiety or feelings of isolation or hopelessness that can come from really heavy stuff and just trying to process their caregiver's medical treatment. That's why Kesem is trying to support these kids with fun, creative, free programs and a summer camp that help uplift them no matter matter what comes next. And Kesem needs you to help them make the magic. Make the Magic is Kesem's annual fundraising gala where they bring local folks together for an evening of storytelling and performance, and most importantly, the chance to make a real difference for Pittsburgh kids. There are 2 opportunities for Make the Magic coming up. Kesem at the University of Pittsburgh is celebrating March 21st at Pitt's University Club, and Kesem at Carnegie Mellon University is throwing their gala the very next day, March 22nd, at the Convention Center downtown. Pick your team, Pitt or CMU, or hey, go to both. Get your tickets now at donate.kesem.org/PittsburghMTM25 or donate.kesem.org/CMUMTM25. Again, that's Kesem, Kesem, and be part of something truly magical. Make the magic, change a life.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
And last up, some new data about how many people are using services like the library and public transit.
Woot woot.
I'm going to start with the library because that is my favorite of the 2.
And also the good news.
That's true. So library use at the Carnegie Public Libraries is up. The library recently had their annual public meeting where they talked all sorts of things. Bill O'Driscoll did some coverage about it for WESA. You can check that out in the show notes. So one big change they talked about was how the library increased hours at their branches. There are 19 of them. And this was a change that started around this time last year, so March.
Yeah.
And now most branches are open until 8 p.m. at least 3 days a week.
Which is also
love this.
amazing. Yes, for like pickup and things like that. Like, because I always put requests in because I'm bad at like going in to browse. And
Same here.
Having them close at like 5 o'clock was so obnoxious. I never made it to pick up my books.
Yeah, and also like more programming, a free
So much
place
more.
to hang out, like all good things. And since this change, again, March, they saw like 20% more visitors than they had before.
That's so incredible. I'm really, really thrilled. And I mean, I know it's coming next. So like, I hope they get to keep this positive change.
I'm going to keep going with the good news for a moment, though.
Yes, please.
So Carnegie Public Library is still pushing ahead with DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing a lot of institutions kind of take down these kind of pages and stuff because of Trump administration threats.
Usually they'll cut funding for whatever the program is if you don't eliminate the office.
Mm-hmm. For what it's worth, CPL doesn't get any federal money, so they're not under these kinds of like threats that, you know, maybe the universities are. But still, like, I am very glad that a place like the library, where you should be able to get free information about all different sorts of things, isn't like trying to limit that access or make it harder for people to find.
Totally.
But on to the bad news. Like a lot of other organizations, the library is worried about budget deficits and they could be going in the negatives in the future. So they're looking for ways to, you know, cut costs, but no word on what those cost-cutting measures will be yet.
Yeah, I mean, it seems weird that they'd have this big meeting and talk about like these great successes with extending hours and then like really shortly after that announce like hour cuts. Like, I hope that that's not what's coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't guess they'd be cutting hours if that's been really successful. In case you were wondering, the reason why the library was able to increase their hours, they got money from RAD, the Regional Asset District, grants from the state, and city taxes. So a bunch of combinations of things, not necessarily coming out of like your pocket alone.
Yeah, and there was also some stuff about the library's main branch in Oakland. They've been working on like big picture plans for the future for a long time. So they say they'll be releasing a survey for community feedback soon. I guess that's going to be on the library's website or our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter as soon as we see it pop.
Absolutely. So, you know, we also have some news about Pittsburgh Regional Transit. I'll throw that over to you, Megan.
Yeah, so library use is up, but unfortunately, our PRT ridership is down. So I guess they crunched their numbers and they saw that people are riding the light rail and the incline more. Although,
Interesting.
keep in mind the periods they were studying, the Mon incline was closed a lot the first year that they're comparing to. So it makes sense that ridership is up. And then bus ridership is, the biggest chunk that they have, and that fell, but only a little bit by 1%.
Okay, so I guess not a ton. It's not surprising to me that PRT ridership is down because they've been saying that like again and again.
Well, and they've also been saying like cuts are coming, which I feel like gives us this like pervasive idea that we shouldn't be riding it or that there's less availability, even if there's not. Like it just like fills me with this sense of like I should dread this, even if it's like an otherwise positive experience.
Yeah, I wonder if people, are hearing that, their bus service might be cut. They're looking for alternate ways of transit and then they aren't riding PRT.
Yeah, this always feels like a chicken and egg thing for me. Like I feel like talking about it being bad makes it worse for people just because you have that in your head. One comment that I thought was interesting, this was from the Pittsburgh Union Progress story about it. The chief development officer over at PRT said that she thinks that ridership patterns should be stable now because numbers fell so much right after the pandemic started. Now, some people have returned to their usual schedule, or settled into new routines. That being said, the numbers are still really, really stark. So 2019, pre-pandemic, there were 62 million rides. Last year, post-pandemic, or, whatever we're calling this, 33 million rides.
Oh, that number's a big difference.
Or thereabouts. Yeah, it's like almost cut in half. I'm glad it's stabilized, but also like that puts it, I think, into more, I don't know, of an acute perspective for me about why changes have to happen. A couple other things to note. The bus on-time performance, which we have talked about on this show, also fell. It also got slightly worse, fell 1% compared to last year.
That aligns with my experience over the past couple years I've been here. It feels like more.
Yeah, we've talked about like the ghost buses, the thing where like the apps tell you they're coming and then they never show up. It's just not a thing. And then overcrowding too is up just a tiny bit. Although that one's confusing to me because if overcrowding is happening, that means that like there are more people on there. Like it just means that there's too many people on the bus to be able to sit down all at once.
Yeah, I've looked into this a little bit. Those tend to be the buses that go through Oakland and the East End.
Got it. Okay.
So that also makes sense that there are a lot of students in the area taking the bus. Oakland, huge work hub. So that is something that PRT is going to look into and fix. I also wonder if the bus rapid transit plan that's coming to Oakland and the East End will help. That is still very much under construction. They are going not necessarily like block by block, but they're chunking off little bits at a time.
Yeah, they always do that just to like try to keep it like from disrupting more traffic than is absolutely necessary. And of course, they're also working on their big redesign plan too. But I think the bus rapid transit portion, the timeline for it, at least at the moment, is 2027.
And with the bus redesign, I've been keeping a close eye on that. We are currently just waiting for the next draft from PRT. Like there aren't any more chances to public comment yet. But if you do want to give your feedback to someone, you can talk to the Southwestern PA Commission. They want feedback on the Allegheny County Safety Action Plan. So this fits into the whole idea of Vision Zero, this concept that there shouldn't be any fatal traffic injuries. The goal is to ultimately end all traffic deaths. So there's an interactive map online. We will have the link in the show notes. You can drop a marker and like kind of mark whether it's like unsafe for walking, biking, cars, and then add some thoughts about why you think that street or area could be improved. What are the safety issues there? You can also add photos if there is an enormous pothole or something else that looks really awful. So this, again, the timeline is still a while away. It's part of the public engagement phase, part one. The timeline for the plan adoption currently looks like maybe it wouldn't be kind of put into place until the end of the year, maybe earlier 2026. Things got a little fuzzy for me if we're looking out that many months.
Yeah, and we'll keep watching the bus line redesign stuff. Again, like Sophia said, public engagement phase, early days. Before we go, a couple more things we're going to be thinking about this weekend. Mine is funny, so I'm going to go first. I've been giggling about this Trib story that I saw. It's actually very serious. It's about all the potholes around Pittsburgh Mills Mall. Sophia, Have you been over there?
I agree that's serious. Yeah, the last time I went was to pick up something from MacBid. It was
There's
snowing.
a huge warehouse over there.
Yeah, and the snow had like accumulated, so you couldn't really tell where the potholes were, and that was a hazard.
Yeah, I mean, it is extremely dangerous, but officials say or tell the Trib that they can't fix anything about it. Like the state can't intervene, the township can't do anything because this is technically all private property over there, and the owners of the mall are just being really terrible stewards of the place.
I honestly thought no one cared because the mall's kind of dying and they were just going to give up. Okay.
No, and that's actually, I was just having this conversation with my dad because he was complaining about it too. And I was just like, you know what? I wonder who owns that property because that's usually the issue in Pittsburgh. It's who owns the road that you were mad about.
So there is a person to blame. It is someone's fault.
There is. And there's actually, the quotes in there are actually pretty pointed if you want to check it out. For what it's worth, the mall itself is not doing super great. Of course, we've talked about, dead and undead malls this week. But the area around it is still doing pretty good. Like customers still need access to those businesses, but they say they're suffering because now people are too scared to drive over to them. Anyway, there's a line in the story about how there's a Facebook group here locally that is now measuring the size of these potholes in Turner's iced tea cartons. And I've been laughing about that all day. That's the spirit I want to take into springtime. Like life is giving us potholes, but we can always counter it with a good beverage and like a happy attitude.
Well, I'll keep on going with the happy attitude with good baby bird news. So a little great horned owl fell out of her nest on the Panther Hollow Bridge. But like I said, it has a happy ending. But a photographer spotted her and tapped in the Tamarack Wildlife Center to help this owl out. The owl is safe and sound. Her beak is a little hurt, but otherwise she's good. But since the bridge isn't the safest place, the owl might get a wild foster family. Did not know you could rehome an owl like that. The pictures in KDKA are incredible, though. Like, this owl looks so happy to be helped when someone's, like, holding her.
She does look pretty delighted by the whole thing. Like, not all birds look this happy to be in human company,
No. But, if you want to have more time with birds, you can always visit the National Aviary.
More baby birds.
Yes. They welcomed 2 baby African penguin chicks. So these penguin chicks, they're so little. So like I said, 2 of them. And their weights at birth, one of them weighed about 1 pack of gum. And the other was 14 sugar packets heavy.
Once again, Americans will do anything but use the metric system. Like, fine.
I like it. It is. I don't know what 55 grams is, but I can imagine 14 sugar packets.
It's very whimsical.
But if you are at the aviary, don't look out for these chicks yet. They are still very little, so they're not in the exhibit. But you can keep an eye on the aviary socials for, when they might make their grand debut, when they get names. That's what I'm looking for.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you like us, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or the equivalent on whatever app you use. Our music is by Benji. Mallory Falk is our executive producer. Sophia Lo and Elizabeth Kalma produced the show this week. Francesca DeBecco writes our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. Kevin Gavin is our trivia master. And I am your host, Megan Harris. We will be back on Monday with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Exactly, especially when this is all led by Doge and Elon Musk.
I don't think I've ever heard Doge before.
I don't know if it was like 100% true. I can redo that.